let's get started. Hello everyone, welcome back. This is our next series setting breakdown. My name is Paul Westman, and this week I'm going to be doing things a little differently because of the series that I'm doing. We'll see how it goes. Alright, today I'm going to be doing my series setting breakdown upon the series known as the Duchy of Terra. This is a series written by Glynn Stewart. Alright. Alright, this is the Duchy of Terra by Glynn Stewart. It is a sci-fi book with some subgenres of an alien invasion and also, in general, more of a space opera. Alright, the length of the series is 9 books. That's divided up into 3 distinct arcs of 3 books each. So there is a change of the main character in the latter 6 books, but it still remains fairly consistent, and overall a pretty good series. The series is a completed series, so that's there if anyone doesn't want to wait for the next book. Alright, and this is a sci-fi book. It is purely sci-fi, so we're stepping away from the fantasy for a little bit. And this is set in the future, though not too far in the future. It states the series begins around the year 2185. It does take place originally on Earth, although it does explore more around the galactic rim in our arm of the Milky Way galaxy. Alright, some of the key technologies. There are 4 basic technologies that were developed at a place that they called Bugworks. There are 4 key technologies that allowed humanity to really expand, or to begin to expand out from the place in the stars. The first is a hyperspatial portal system, which is more commonly referred to as a hyperdrive. I'll get more into specifics about that a little bit later, but this is what allows people to travel into hyperspace, which is the form of faster than light travel that the series uses. Next is called the Gravitational Hyperspatial Interface Momentum Engine. But anybody without 5 degrees would just call it an interface drive. That is a new form of propulsion that this place developed to replace fusion torch drives or any sort of combustion drive engines. It does allow propulsion at a much faster rate and to much higher speeds than any fusion torch would allow, and also it is inertialess, which I know doesn't really adhere to physics, but it's a story and it's pretty good. This is not the most hard sci-fi, but the fact that they go out of their way to explain this and to explain the maneuverability of the ships is appreciated. Now the max speed for the interface drive on a ship is up to 0.4 C, which is 40% the speed of light. And next they have the interface missiles, which is the next logical step from the interface drive. Instead of putting the engine onto a ship, you put it onto a block of whatever. There are no actual warheads because simply you put the kinetic impact of these weapons is so powerful that having any sort of warhead or explosion or anything on that is kind of redundant at this point. And while the interface drive that can allow for people to travel and on ships only goes up to 0.4 C, the kinetic impactors, which don't need any of those safeties, can travel up to 0.6 C. So does travel extremely fast. And the last real big invention that they developed is compressed matter armor. Now what that is basically how like 99% of all atoms is just empty space. Compressed matter armor is the idea that you can reduce all that empty space to provide a much more solid metal. In sci-fi, that is sometimes called neutronium, because basically all matter is reduced to the neutrons and protons in the core of an atom. But this compressed matter armor is said to be not like a true neutronium, but very close. So this is a series that I do appreciate that they do have some kind of advanced armor which is able to protect the ships, because on Earth they have not actually developed any sort of energy shields yet. Right? Now, outside of these four basic technologies, there are others that are brought in to play, either from interactions with aliens or from other developments. First is artificial gravity is a standard thing throughout the series. Humanity did discover it a while ago, so it's another way to help basically sort the ships, so you don't have to have like all the levels being horizontal to the engines in the back. Yeah, so they do have artificial gravity, though it's never explained how they developed it, but it is nice to have that on there. There is no faster than light communications. Those are all done through basically like relays through ships, and it does get developed much later in the series, but at the beginning there is nothing in particular on that, though it doesn't make too much of a difference because there's very little interstellar communication needed. Now for communication, language translators, they are provided. They do have to be programmed, sometimes calibrated a little bit, but it is explained as translators typically worn like over the ear or whatever species equivalence is. Now, as for shields, aliens do have some sort of energy shielding, but it is explained that like the compressed matter armor is actually not something that is commonly developed, as it is usually done through like a mistake in some sort of calculations. So most of the alien species do rely on shields. In addition to the interface missiles, there are also common laser and proton beams. That is typically the like smaller arm of the warships. So proton beams are considered like a far more advanced version of a standard laser, and lasers are considered rather backwater technology-wise for the Empire. Alright, now we'll talk a little bit about hyperspace. Uh, First off, the hyperdrive that I mentioned earlier, what that does is instead of like phasing a ship, it actually shoots out and opens a portal for you to actually fly the ship through to enter hyperspace. Uh, One interesting synergy about that is multiple ships can actually combine their beams to drastically increase the size of the portal being used. That is a technique that is used multiple times throughout the series. Now, in hyperspace, scanners don't work very well, if at all, so it's very hard to get readings. What that often means is that you'll have to like put in calculations for how far you want to travel and how quickly you want to get there beforehand. Though maps are sort of available, it's just very difficult to get accurate readings from hyperspace itself. That does limit the navigation, like I said, so much of the calculations have to be done while you're in normal space before you jump into hyperspace. Now, hyperspace itself does contain like currents that how the space itself flows in certain manners, and these currents are rather steady, and they do allow like certain paths through hyperspace to be plotted to get your destination either much faster, or if you don't know about them, they can actually hold you back much more than you would originally anticipate. So it's very valuable to know where these currents are, although mostly the currents are mapped by the core powers of the galaxy. Now, I'm going to start getting into more of the political entities while also talking about the various alien species, because those two are rather intertwined. First, we'll just get the standard humans on Earth out of the way, and I'll also be introducing a few of the main characters, because some of them are more relevant and appear more often than others. First, Earth uses, while the different countries on Earth still exist and still have some infighting, there is a United Earth Space Force whose purpose is to expand and protect the Earth from exterior forces. The chief of operations is one Admiral Jean Villeneuve. He is originally from France and still maintains some of the stronger French culture about him. Alright. Next up we have the Nova Industries. This is a private corporation that is essentially modeled off of SpaceX, basically. The CEO is a man named Elon Casimir, which is basically, he's more or less modeled off of like Tony Stark, where he is the CEO, but he's also a very, very intelligent scientist himself. His father was the founder of the company, and his father invented many things and built on the wealth, but Nova Industries, they are the ones that actually developed the Bugworks lab, and they're the ones who privately funded all of those technological advancements that I laid out before. And Next, we have under Nova Industries is Captain Annette Bond. She is the main character for the first arc of the series. Right. She is a former commander in the UESF, the Space Force, and she was sort of retired after the captains who were there sort of organized against her when she challenged one of them on his bad behavior and ended up getting him arrested because what he was doing was highly illegal. So once she did that, basically her career in the military was over, but she moved over to Nova Industries and she became the captain of their first whole experimental ship that introduced those technologies. That's about it for Earth. So next we get into the outer powers of the Milky Way. We're only going to discuss two of them because they're the only two that really impact what happens in the story. But the first is the Atoll Imperium. And this does bring up one of the things I rather like about this series is that it does introduce some less westernized phonetics into the alien language. You'll notice how it's spelled with that exclamation point in there. That's like a sort of glottal stop or a click that is actually used in like some African languages is where you'll see it sometimes. So it's fairly often throughout the series that you'll see this because it's used by the atoll, and they are not human-like at all. They're actually almost squid-like. They have 4 ambulatory tentacles that they move around on, while also having about a dozen or so other like arms or manipulator tentacles that they use to handle stuff. And what that click is actually in their language, which we don't actually get to see because they always use a translator, is that's like a snapping of their beak. So it's a very interesting like cultural use. Another thing that Glynn Stewart does really well in this series is he provides a lot of idioms that we can recognize, but also that we can recognize as not being from any sort of language on Earth. Because, for instance, the atoll are originally ocean-dwelling group. They were able to evolve to live on land, but a lot of their language and their idioms deal with like tides and other various water-based stuff that normal people, all that normal land-based creatures might not have developed. Right? Interesting little tidbit about them is their skin actually changes color according to their emotions. That has led them to be terrible liars and far more honest, even though that's not really fleshed out until later. So, now some of the key people involved in the Imperium are the Empress at Shaw. She is the leader of the Imperium. Next, we have Fleet Lord Tan Shala. He is basically the force commander who gets sent to essentially conquer Earth. And the last one we see the most of is called Kitana. She is sort of an exile from the rest of her people, but we do run into her relatively early in the series, and she joins the crew as in a more advisory capacity and basically explains the workings of the galactic polities in the area where Earth has found themselves. Right? Next, we have what are known as the Imperial races. These are all still a part of the Imperium. The Imperium has, it's said to be like 27 or 28 different races involved in it. But there are 3 that are called the Imperial races. Now, the reason why they're called the Imperial races is because they were the first ones that were conquered by the Imperium. And what happened is, since they were very new at basically colonizing and controlling, they unintentionally wiped out these races' entire culture and subsumed their own on top of it, which had some negative effects, but basically people from these races are given higher positions of authority or are given more leeway, essentially out of sort of regret or reparation for what the atoll originally did to their cultures. So we have the Tsumi, there's a brief description, the Avita, and the Pibo. We don't see them too much, and none of them have any particular named characters that hold too much relevance in the story, but it is brought up about the Imperial races and how they came about and how the Imperium learned to no longer do that. Next up, we have other races that are more common that we deal with. The Rikiki, which are basically crocodile centaurs, is how they're described. Next, we have the Indiri, which is more of a humanoid, hairy, frog-like group. And the Yin, another humanoid group. Alright. Next, we deal with the other big power in our neighborhood in the galaxy, and that is known as the Kanzi theocracy. Right, now, the Kanzi are short humanoid species. I believe they're said to be around like 5 foot. They are blue-furred and are sometimes jokingly referred to as Smurfs throughout the series. But they are a very violent and oppressive culture. They are slavers. They are well known for their slaves. In fact, there are 19 slave races that they essentially control in a way that is a bit different than the way the Imperium sort of annexes various groups. Yeah, the Kanzi just kind of throw brute force at it and enslave it. They are a very violent group as well. Right? And that's it for the relevant outer powers that we deal with. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the relevant core powers. There's many mentioned in this. It's mentioned that there are many, but the only ones that really we deal with first are the lions. They are a insect-like creature, although much larger. They're said to appear reminiscent of scarab beetles. They're very advanced. The further into the core you go, typically the more advanced of a species you are. So where the humans are far less advanced than the atoll is much less advanced than the lions and any of the core powers. Next, we have the lion's primary, say, rivals in the Windira, that they are another insect-like species. Although they have multiple subspecies and they're organized in more of a hive. So you have like royals, which are like the queens who can actually give birth, and then you have warriors, workers, drones. So they fight with more like a hive mind groupthink type deal, which does lead to many of them like willingly sacrificing themselves in swarm tactics. All right, and lastly, in the core powers that we really deal with, we have the Meshurum, which is, they are considered the elder species in the galaxy. They are also the most advanced, and they're the ones that technically enforce the rules. They tend to be mostly solitary. They do not like interacting with other species. It's even said that they don't even like interacting within their own species. So oftentimes they have very large ships, even though they're not overly large themselves, just so that they can stay away from other people. And it's considered very odd and almost insane to them to be willing to interact with people. But they do have some like counselors who do that. They're described as being like roughly 12-foot long millipedes, so another insectoid like. But yeah. So another thing is they're very protective of their technologies. So oftentimes they will show up to like enforce certain technological bans, and they are basically the police force of the galaxy, though they can't be everywhere at once, and that does cause problems. Alright, now we're going to deal into some sort of offshoots, and we'll talk about Tortuga. That is a translated name. It is a lion spaceship / clan. Basically, they were exiled from the rest of their species. They no longer, it was almost an entire fleet, but they no longer had people or planet to fight for. So they were sent out of the Empire, and since if they stayed in the core, that would have put them in danger, so to speak. What they did is they moved into the outer sphere of the galaxy and actually set up shop in the atoll Imperial territory. Their ship is basically like a shipyard or a station. It is considered to be like around the size of a city. And while it is translated to English as Tortuga, their native language also refers to it more as translated into the builder of sorrows. So, like I said, they are exiles from their own people, but it is also a core technology, so they are still a bit more advanced than anyone else in the immediate area. And their relevance is that they will offer repairs and trade, and basically as a base of sorts, to pirates, smugglers, and slavers. Even if they don't necessarily agree with those factions' morals, they do understand that they do require that sort of trade to continue to exist. So they have allowed it, so long as they're not like actively enslaving people on the ship or on their station. So they do have set rules, but basically, so long as you're not violating their standards on their base, they're willing to overlook what you do. All right, now their primary leaders are High Captain Ridotak and Dockmaster Orenthal. So, yeah, the High Captain is the one who's in charge of the entire place, and the Dockmaster is their primary ship builder, ship repairer, and is the one that our crew ends up talking to upgrade their ship. Alright, now an important piece of information to sort of know about the series, although it is not really immediately relevant, is called the Covius Treaty. What this is basically, it is a treaty that the Meshroom sort of came up with and have enforced upon all the other species because they have the best, and it is around any sort of species main planet, like where they evolved, there is a 40 light year radius, and all that territory, whether they know about it or not, whether they can reach it or not, all that territory does belong to that one species. So that is in place to allow species to grow, to develop, to be able to spread, so it doesn't get overly cramped or cause any sort of friction or interspecies war over territory itself. That is the intended purpose of that, but it doesn't really always work. Like I said, it is nominally enforced by the core powers, primarily the Meshroom, but they can't be everywhere at once, and the galaxy is a big place. So, right. Now, I'm going to be doing the book review into two parts. The first part will be a more spoiler-free review, and then I'm going to talk to sort of review the book as more of a spoiler, though I will have a separate slide for that and a separate ending for that. So if you do not want any sort of spoilers for the book, then feel free to stop watching, and let's get into it. First, we have a setting. Mostly takes place, partially takes place on Earth, but the majority of what we see, it takes place on the ship Tornado. It is the initial ship that was developed by the Bugworks for Nova Industries. It is the only experimental ship that they developed that actually has a full suite of the 4 technologies that they developed, and it is the most advanced ship that humans came up with up to this point. We later move on to Tortuga, and we spend a significant amount of time there, and that is briefly used as a base of sorts. Though we do move on from there again relatively shortly. Main character of the book is Annette Bond. Talked about her a little bit before. She is the captain of the Tornado, and she is placed into a very unique situation that sort of defines the entirety of the book, although it should be noted that it does not define the entirety of the series. So, some of the key secondary characters that we deal with are Jean Villeneuve. He remains on Earth, and we go back to him several times. We also deal with Elon Casimir, even though we never really see his perspective. He just plays a major role throughout this book and throughout the series. And I mentioned like Ki Toll. She is becomes basically a mentor or guide on the ship. And last we have Tan Chalet. He is the one who is initially sent to conquer Earth. Alright, so basically, quick spoiler-free review. The book is about after humans are able to develop these technologies, they look out through their sensors, and they have noticed that there are other alien species around. So, and a lot of these technologies were actually developed as an attempt to defend the planet from the aliens if they prove hostile. What they didn't know is that by developing the technologies, that gave incentive for the aliens to actually show up, and Tan Shala shows up with a massive force that can easily overwhelm the entire UESF, and he does. He states that their goal is not conquest per se, but rather to annex Earth into the Imperium and to basically uplift humanity and to provide them with basically technology that would bring them to the same level as the rest of the Imperium. Now, naturally, humans, they don't really believe him because of our own experiences with colonialism in our world. So the ships are sent to fight, but because it is such an overwhelming force, the command already sees this as a no-win situation. So they send a single order out to Annette Bond, who is in charge of the Tornado, captaining the single most advanced ship that humanity developed, and the only advanced ship that humanity developed. And that ship really isn't even on par with the alien ships yet. So they send her to go out to escape using the hyperdrive and to essentially become a privateer, which is basically to become a governmentally approved pirate. And her mandate is to go out, make alliances, get some technology, and then find a way to come back and free Earth from the oppressors. So that is essentially what the entire plot of the first book is. So it is a very good book. It does have a lot of unique things that I haven't seen in other books. Like in regards to the language, I do also appreciate that many of the alien species are not humanoid. So I highly recommend reading this series. It's a fantastic series. It is the Duchy of Terra, Book 1, The Terran Privateer, by Glynn Stewart, who if you've seen my other videos, you may know him from the Starships Mage series as well, which is another series I reviewed. Very fantastic series as well, so go check him out. And if you do not want a more spoiler-filled review, or a spoiler-filled discussion, then you can go ahead and leave now, as we now move on to a little bit more spoiler-filled discussion. Alright, I have this listed out into a few different parts. Like I said, first was the conquest of Earth, which is basically the only thing I covered in that spoiler-free discussion. Aliens showed up. They said, we're here to help you out. Humanity does not believe them for good reason. And Captain Bond is sent off to go steal technology, learn more, develop alliances, and free the planet. Basically, what she does is that she goes into hyperspace. They manage to sort of stumble into an attack of sorts. They were able to basically take over another ship, and that is where they met. It was essentially another pirate crew who was attacking another freighter, and but like I mentioned before, the compressed matter armor is very specialized technology in the galaxy, and something that the outer systems don't necessarily have. So they were able to defeat the pirates, take over their ship, and that is where we meet Kitana, and from there she sort of pledges allegiance to Net Bond, and that is when she becomes sort of a mentor and a guide throughout their journey, and she's able to direct them towards Tortuga. Now, once they get to Tortuga, that is when they first encounter the Kanzi, and the Kanzi demonstrate themselves to be much more vile and aggressive and vicious group than any other they've encountered up till that point. And so they do get into some violent encounters, but the humans do manage to prevail again, due in part to some discipline and laying their own ambushes and using surprise on their side. Now, this causes problems because one of the rules of Tortuga is no violence. So there is some initial conflict between the human ship and Tortuga, but that is rather resolved quickly once the Kanzi have shown that they're willing to demonstrate violence towards the crew of the Tortuga as well. And what that allows the crew of Tortuga to do is it in an attempt to show just how bad of an idea it was to go against them on their own shipyard or system. They give discounts for the Tornado to get upgraded, and they also input much more advanced technology than they normally would have otherwise. So what NetBond is left with is a more advanced ship and some money that they were able to, or that they were given as reparations for the violence of the Kanzis who attacked them earlier. And so with the ship and with that money, she goes seeking information and alliances. Now, since it is a shipyard full of pirates and smugglers and slavers, those alliances are not necessarily very good, and she gets sort of enlisted into a pirate armada. That the plan is to go out and attack an Imperium base and sort of steal all their supplies, and then use that to basically sell and get rich. Now, as all unholy alliances like that, it does break down, and it's discovered that a lot of these pirates and slavers have actually been kidnapping and enslaving humans for a few years. Now, the human ship's obviously not going to tolerate that, and with the advanced technology, they managed to wipe out the vast majority of the armada after the Imperium base had already been conquered, in a sense. And some corruption in the Imperium was rooted out as well. So what they do learn is that there's a secondary base that is much closer to Earth, and there's some experimental technologies that they had been developing there that could threaten the balance of the entire sector of the galaxy, and that these pirates actually were wanting to cause a much wider spread war. So to prevent that, the Tornado goes off, and they conquer this new pirate base, and they find what are known as Star Killer weapons, which, just like they sound, they're weapons designed to explode a star. Now, these are highly illegal, highly dangerous, and eventually what Annette does is she goes to the Imperium capital, and she is presented with a choice to either force the Imperium to free her people using the threat of the Star Killers, or to essentially bend the knee to what has demonstrably been a much more well-intentioned group of people than the other closest group, that is the Kanzi, whose only goal is to dominate and enslave. So essentially what happens is Annette chooses to surrender to the Imperium, and as a return for the service, the Empress actually appoints her to be the Duchess of the Terran of Terra, and to essentially make Terra into a duchy in and of itself within the Imperium, which is a slightly higher rank than it normally would have been otherwise. And that is how the series gets the name the Duchy of Terra. And that's why the Terran Privateer, well, it starts off more like a pirate story. It ends up being more of a military space opera with essentially the military becoming a new focus instead of a single ship and a single captain. So that's why I did the spoiler, because the first book does transition after the first book into a much different style. So still a very good series. I highly recommend all of them. And that'll be it for today. So again, it is the Duchy of Terra series by Glynn Stewart. Have an